This is the Living History Podcast, broadcasting live across the airwaves.
Hello everyone, welcome to a special bonus episode of Living History, and something that I say all the time when we talk about the Anzac story is it's not an old story. It's important that we pay our respects to generations that went before and people that served in the First World War and the Second World War and onwards, but we should always remember that this history is still being written. There are tens of thousands of Australians who served in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we now have more veterans in Australian society than at any time since the Vietnam War. So we should remember that there's a lot of young blokes out there, a lot of young blokes and ladies who have served in these more recent conflicts. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that today. And I'm joined by Sean and Matt from an organisation called 42 for 42. And they're basically doing great work building a memorial in Brisbane to the blokes who were killed in Afghanistan. So I wanted to get them on the program just to talk about the good work that they're doing and to hear a little bit more about the project. So Matt and Sean, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks, Matt.
So, Sean, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about your background and what led to this idea for a memorial in Brisbane.
Yeah, well, I served in Afghanistan in 2010 and come home injured from there as a combat engineer, high researcher, and I joined a few organisations around Brisbane to help with my recovery and, I guess, self-esteem to get back in society. From there, I sort of felt that I wanted to do more with the guys I serve with in the combat roles and do something together to help us bond and move forward from some of the struggles. And we started off doing a bit of a charity run for the engineers, Sappers Run. And from there, I did a trip to America and seen some memorials dedicated to the modern-day veterans, such as with Iraq and Afghanistan over there. And even back to Vietnam, how they've sort of remembered in America. And I thought this is pretty spectacular. And wanted to do something in Brisbane, particularly for all the boys we lost over in Afghanistan and through Operation Slipper, and come home and spoke to some close mates of mine who I served with, and we came up with an idea that we want to build a memorial, dedicate and educate people about what the war in Afghanistan was all about.
Well, I've seen the paperwork you've got describing what the memorial is going to be like. It's pretty bloody impressive. But just before we get to that, we'll talk about it in a bit more detail. But do you think when we talk about these more modern conflicts, particularly Afghanistan, do you think Aussies understand it well enough? Do you think they know what went on? Do you think it sits front of mind for most Australians when they talk about Anzacs and Anzac history?
Not Afghanistan. So I think with the media these days, it is reported, but not to an extent where people know what's happening. Afghanistan was built on a war of terror, so we have fought terror and what the Taliban use in their country to help fund terrorism. So I don't think we're all over it. I think the word terror in society these days does strike fear of everyone, but we're out in the front line fighting it, and it started with Afghanistan. And I'd like people personally, from being on Operation Slipper and serving over there, it'd be nice for people to understand why we were there, and not just the fact that we were fighting terrorism, but that we helped build a country, put it back on its feet with schools, roadways and that. So the modern day Anzac, we probably could recognise a little bit more. I think it's improving, especially you go to Anzac Day ceremonies. It's bigger, but I know I've had conversations with people, and they often reflect on World War I and World War II. But and you said in your intro, there's a lot more veterans around Australia these days than ever before, and I think we've got to remember what sacrifices they gave to help better our country, and not just the country but the world.
Well, you blokes are obviously doing a lot to tell people the story of Afghanistan. Tell us a bit about the organisation 42 for 42 and about the memorial that you're building in Brisbane.
Yeah, 4242. It's in honour of the 41 soldiers we lost in Afghanistan, and the 42 is the symbol of that we keep losing the blokes, not just blokes, sorry, we keep losing soldiers to suicide. So we call the 42 the 42nd soldier, and that's where it comes with concept. And we get really behind a lot of different Afghanistan initiatives, soldiers and organisations getting out there trying to better better themselves and their self-esteem. And then our way is to build a memorial. And at the moment, we're working hard, and it's been a long road, but it's one that with a lot of experience has come out of it for the boys. And I think it's a good way for us all to connect and get together. We hold a few events that we like our 42-hour challenge, which we do at Suncorp Stadium. It started off really small with a handful of us in our first year, and last year we held it and we had over 600 people attend, and majority of those being Afghanistan veterans and their families as well.
Matt, you've been pretty heavily involved in this project for a while now. Tell us about the memorial and what you hope to achieve with it.
Well, like Sean was sort of saying to you before, they thought that it was going to be quite a small thing, you know, like not very much to it, you know, maybe raise 10 grand and they could build it, but it's sort of blown out, I suppose you could call it, to something much larger than that. So it's a little patch of area, a little patch of ground, sort of in the shadow of Suncorp Stadium, sort of to, like, I suppose you could say it's landlocked, sort of like Afghanistan is, so it sort of fits it quite appropriately. So there'll be a sort of like a pathway you could sort of go around. There's some storyboards that'll actually tell the story, like Sean was saying before, of not just what they did, but why they did it. Help to clear up some of those sort of military terms and phrases that people don't understand. And then each of the guys that died have their own plaque that's sort of solely dedicated to them. There'll be some statues as well, even with the dogs as well, so they're not going to forget about the dogs that were killed over there.
Yeah, I think that's something that lots of people engage with, is this story of the working dogs that were killed, you know, sniffing out explosives and combat support roles. Was it always important that you feature the dogs as well as the humans that paid that price?
Yeah, well, those dogs are diggers as well. They have they got their own rank and Reggie number, and, you know, I think without those dogs, I think, you know, there'd be a hell of a lot more than 42 names going into that memorial. You know what I mean? The work they did is second to none. I think, like, just talking to Sean and some of the dog handlers that I've met through these guys as well, and yeah, they'd be lost without their dogs over there. Like, that's their mate, you know. So yeah, I think it's important to remember everybody and everyone, you know, that paid the price over there. So,
and you brought with you today a really magnificent plaque dedicated to one of the soldiers that'll be featured on the memorial. Tell me about the plaques and what information you hope they convey to visitors.
The plaques are having built over in a company over in Perth. They did a pretty good support for us as well. So about A4 size. Sorry, they'll have their core badge on there, their Reggie number, obviously their name and rank, their date of death, and how old they were. They'll all have the rising sun and the Australian flag on it. So the memorial will have an app that goes along with it as well. That's in development at the moment. So not only will you get to sort of see their military history, or, you know, what these guys did, but you also get to know who they were as a person, you know, like Cameron Baird with his footy and that sort of thing. So, I think it's pretty important to know that these guys weren't just soldiers doing a job, but they were also husbands, fathers, sons, you know, good mates, and they weren't just a soldier. So,
who do you hope is going to visit this memorial, and what do you want them to experience while they're there, and what do you want them to take away from having visited the memorial?
I'd hope everyone comes to visit it. I want everyone to come visit it because it's going to be a dedication to all the people that served over in Afghanistan. It's going to have we believe it's going to have every aspect that we can put in there, information, and it's going to be an education to people to understand why we fought in Afghanistan. It's going to be built by veterans as well. So we have Hutchison Builders supporting us to help us do the finished products, but majority of it is going to be veteran built from the Afghan
Because you mentioned
War.
this, it's like the Great Ocean Road, isn't it? The Great Ocean Road was down in Victoria, was built after the First World War by soldiers as a as a testament to their mates, as a memorial to their mates, but also to give them something to do, as they struggle to fit back into civilian life. So you've got the same ideal for this memorial, haven't you?
Yeah, well, that's where we got the idea from, the Great Ocean Road, realising through my getting better and working, I researched on some things, what makes us move forward. So we look back there, and I look at the Great Ocean Road, and I think it's a great concept. Keep busy. I know jobs are harder a lot back then to get, but it's still the same thing with veterans these days. They leave the army, not necessarily going to get work. So this is a way to get them back in society. And from my experiences, I lost mates in Afghanistan while I was there. We didn't get to mourn them. We had to just keep moving forward and doing our job. So here's an idea to put together to help us mourn as well and pay our respects to the families and to our mates, but also to the guys. Anyone that's served in Afghanistan is going to take part. They just have to send us an email. We'll reach out to them, and they can be part of this process to build it memorial. And it's something people like. They travel down Great Ocean Roads. I know for myself, I travelled down there because it was built by veterans in World War I, not just for the beautiful scenery, but for what it represents. And that's what we hope this memorial does, and gives people the understanding that Afghanistan is Australia's longest war, and one that we, once again, Australian Defence Force fought proudly in.
Well, very well said, boys. It's great work that you're doing, and hopefully the memorial begins construction very soon. If you're listening to this and would like to donate to what is a very worthwhile cause, you can go to www.42for42.org.au, and I'm sure those donations will be gratefully received. But, fellas, I'll keep checking in with you. I'm looking forward to seeing the memorial take shape, and just thanks for joining us on the show to tell us about what's an absolutely fantastic project.
No worries, mate.
Yeah, cheers, Matt. Thank you.